In our today's video, we'll be discussing the division that exists within American elite, which has now become a struggle between President Trump and those who prefer President Joe Biden. But before we start, I wanted to say to those who are new here that I am Commander Robinson-Farinazzo, a military officer in the Navy Reserve. So if you guys want to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe, comment, share, and leave a thumbs up. With that said, I wanted to say the following. If we draw a comparison between the two presidents, we'll notice here, for instance, that the growth of the American GDP under Biden's administration is greater than Trump's administration. But the inflation in the Biden era is much higher in terms of policies. It's the foreign policies of both presidents. We see disasters on both sides, right? And President Trump, we see him pulling out from, he tore up the nuclear deal with Iran, and under President Biden, we have the war in Ukraine. Ukraine, it's the war in Israel, the situation of the closed Red Sea, and so on. So if we really look, there's not much difference. Sure, we have differences in migration policy between Biden and Trump, right? Trump was much more restrictive, but what about Biden? On the social side, we believe that he might have a more open hand. So if we thoroughly observe and conduct an in-depth analysis, quite in-depth of both, we see that what actually exists between one and the other is an ideological preference within the American elite. A part of the American elite is more liberal and is more in tune with the policies of Joe Biden and his alliances within the United States. And another part of the elite is more conservative and sees Donald Trump. And speaking of him, it's not the majority of the electorate sees Donald Trump as someone who will defend their ideas and interests, because we are only talking about the American elite. Because for a few decades now, the United States has become a patriciate and one of the countries with one of the highest income concentrations in the world. The salary difference between the factory floor and the executive level is abysmal. This has been happening since the 1970s, right? So we notice that it is a country geared towards the wealthier classes. There is a huge divide between the real American gentry and the middle class, the grassroots American. So much so that we notice that for you to reach the presidency, some positions in the United States are $1-million campaigns, right? The person will only get there if they have a large financial input. Logical, right? As Colonel McGregor says, it's the donors. They're going to serve the interests of these donors. So it's a society. It's becoming a country with very little connection with grassroots democracy, right? The number of homeless people is increasing, military spending is growing alarmingly, and as I told you, the income concentration in America, it is absolutely brutal. So the presidential race ends up becoming more, right, a question of who the elites prefer, which faction of the elite will end up winning and putting their favorite in the White House has less and less to do, right, with the will of the rednecks, with the will of the base. What we're going to see from now on, right, is the most privileged elite abusing lawfare to try to arrest Donald Trump, prevent him from running, and the American base is outraged about all this. We don't know where it's going to end up. The last time, right? The last empire we know of that had a fight of the patriciate was the Roman Empire. And we all know how it ended.